The Canadian music icon who scared this engineer producer into, well, being sober, which is literally a sobering story, right? They usually are. King Biscuit Boy. How did that start for you with him?
With him, well, I was working for a local PA company in Hamilton. This guy Lou Frelinetto, him and his brother ran what was called the Guitar Clinic, and his brother made basses and they fixed guitars and sold guitars. And then downstairs was a workshop, and that's where Lou would build PA cabinets, and I would help him, and then I would go out on the road with these PA systems and stuff like that. So that's where I was getting all my kind of like knowledge of crossovers and consoles and mixing and stuff like that. So I could kind of really kind of recreate that live, like what records should sound like live, while I'm mixing all these bands. So yeah, so that's kind of like how it started in Hamilton. And so then I just got this tour through Lou, and he said, well, you're going to go across Canada with King Biscuit Boy. He's a harmonica player, and he's like a legendary blues guy. And I said, all right. And so we rented a cube van. There was 7 guys and a dog, and we get in this cube van, and there was a guitar player from Hamilton called Mikey, Guitar Mikey. He was one of the guys, and then Greg Stark was from Buffalo, and he brought his dog, and it was just the beginning of the craziness that's about to happen. So we drove from Hamilton all the way to Vancouver for our first show at the gas light pump or something like that, the gas pump. Yeah, and then, yeah, so Biscuit was, he's an amazing blues guy. I got my whole blues education. I'd be playing like the Blues Brothers. He goes, take that shit off. That's not blues. He's like, listen to this fucking Albert King and, Little Walter and, like the true, people of the blues and stuff like that. And so he would play all those songs, and plays this harp. But he had an alcohol problem. It was really a heavy alcoholic, and I think it may have shocked me at the time because I never drank after that tour. I never drank alcohol since then. I was 19 years old, and I saw what it did to him. It was just, he'd be playing the harp and then just fall back into his amp, and then we'd be at a dinner table and he'd crawl up on the table and he'd grab spaghetti and put it on his head, and just like, just crazy stuff, so but I give him credit because after all those years, I look back at his thing and I found out that he had made a record in New Orleans with the Meters. And it was like, and I listened to that record after I'd worked with the Neville Brothers and some of the Meter guys. And it's like, how did he get that? And, how did he manage to do that? And so it's an amazing record. And yeah, it's amazing to look back at like who you were working for. And then in Hamilton, it was they had this place called the Leander Boat Club. And so they had this blues society in Hamilton, and they would bring all these blues acts up. So I was working this Leander Boat Club every Sunday or whatever. They had the event. And so like Albert King came through, Buddy Guy, like all these legendary guys, like it was amazing to see them. And so because of that, later in life, I knew who these blues people were. So talking to Dylan, oh, you know who Little Walter is? Oh yeah, like, and same with the King brothers, Albert King, BB King, they're all, not many people studied, blues or whatever. So, and younger people around my age, it was more Led Zeppelin and, that kind of stuff, and Stones. I think that was a pretty big education for me.
Well, how did you know to be cool? I mean, was that intrinsically something that you knew? Like you'd mentioned in interviews that, and I know that from a radio guy, we are the bottom feeders of entertainment, but still we're in that arena where we learn backstage before we introduce a band.
Yeah.
And not to be cool. And as you've mentioned many times, you don't say to Robert Plant, remember that time on Zeppelin 2? You don't do that. No. But how did you learn that? By watching? Did you just pick that up? How did you learn to be cool?
I just think it was like I was never intimidated by stardom or people or who they were, like, not even Bob Dylan or anybody. Like there was because I'm working, I gotta like maintain a work ethic, and like, get the mic stands in, everything plugged in, and just, ask them questions about, like, their guitar, and they tell me different stories about what they like to play and stuff like that. So it was on a more of a musical kind of like palette of kind of talking with them. And you can't be starstruck or, like, none of that. You can't have that because you're about to, like, you're working all the time with them. So yeah, so a lot of the time, you're just shooting the shit. And
Links to both of Mark Howard's books are in the description where you can pick them up. One is the storybook, basically telling the stories about working with all the greats: Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, Bob Dylan, Tom Waits, Tragically Hip, and so many more. So we'll have links to both books. Like I said, the first one's the storybook. The second one is basically the pictures book. We've showed you some pictures in the videos. Links to that and a lot more. If you want to help the channel, there are links. Subscribe. Check out our podcast. It's a fairly new podcast. It's doing really, really well, and you can hear a lot of our full interviews on our podcast. Share our videos and podcasts, and like, comment. We'd appreciate that. I'm John Beaudin.